As you guys know, this is Sophie Thatcher from Prospect and the filmmakers Zeek, Earl, and Caldwell. It'll be coming out in theaters November 2nd from Gunpowder Sky sci-fi label Dust. It's their first feature film that's coming out from their sci-fi label.
So guys, first question out.
Yeah.
First time film, what was the whole process of going from your short film expanding out to a film?
Let's start.
Well, it was a 4-year process, which was, like an emotional roller coaster. We're first-time film directors. We're just trying to get people to trust us with lots of money to make a movie. But in retrospect, I'm really glad it took so long because we rewrote the script 3 or 4 times. We used that time to pour more detail into this original sci-fi world, make more concept art, really think things out. And I think it's a much, much better movie because of that long incubation period.
I really see a lot of indies doing sci-fi films, and it's really honest to yourself to try to live up to that idea of great world building in such a medium, medium-sized person.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the very intentional strategic angles we took for the film, even from the time we were making the short. And in the short film, we were able to kind of establish a lot of the flavor of the world and kind of the basic premise. But one of the things we set out to do with this film was to see how far we could push an indie-level budget in the space of the practicals, like the production design manifested in real physical objects and the suits, the costumes, the props, the sets. And so that's kind of one of the kind of behind the scenes aspirations of the film, was to do an indie sci-fi work that kind of, was trying to get at that classic Star Wars feel, the Alien, the kind of sci-fi films that aren't in front of green screens that you feel like you can reach out and touch and hold on to. So,
for Sophie, how did that feel to actually have the practical sets there for you to interact with? And how was it working with Pedro Pascal in so many just you and him scenes in the environment?
Well, it made it easier with the spacesuit, actually. It was hard at first, just getting used to it, but a couple of weeks in, I became accustomed to the helmet and the visor. Once I put the helmet on, it felt like I was delving into this universe of Prospect. And working with Pedro was amazing. At first, I was a bit intimidated by him because it was my first feature and I was just feeling things out, but we became really close, and as the story progresses, our characters become close too, so that happened kind of organically.
For the cat,
freak out not trying to not being able to scratch your nose.
The helmets were
I got really used to it, yeah.
They were a really unique challenge for the whole cast, and I don't know if we have the record, but we've got to be close to kind of the most lines of dialogue recorded in a completely enclosed helmet.
I want someone to figure that out.
Yeah. Which, it's a challenge for the actors because, their voices are bouncing around in their heads, and we had to kind of develop a lot of interesting ways to kind of accommodate that. You quickly realize why so many science fiction films try to get their characters out of helmets as quickly as possible. Essentially, when by the end of it, we had pit crews for each actor, where after every time that we yelled cut, the visor would come off, they'd be wiping it down with anti-fog, there's all kinds of ventilation happening.
F1 pit team, just getting in there, with the way the costume's so complicated. But yeah, every time I see a YouTube comment, even on the trailer, they're like, wait, they don't take their helmets off in this movie. I'm like, yes, we didn't. We suffered.
So, I'm sorry, how did you guys get Pedro Pascal to sign on for this new plot?
He just really connected with the script. He really liked the language, which I got to hand credit to Chris for kind of inventing this really original vernacular that's from this world. And he just kind of loved that challenge to take on the words.
So you guys are doing multiple roles, not even just writing and directing and also producing and typing. What's your day like?
Really, we just don't know any better. Chris and I ran a small commercial production company in Seattle, and we just made ads together and then made short films, and it sort of organically grew, and it's just what we've always done. So we've just kind of built this very specific co-directing relationship that allows me to run the camera and kind of design the visual world and kind of, jump in and out. So it's just kind of I'm not sure we know how to do it any other way.
You guys brought up dialogue, how much dialogue there is. I feel like science fiction films have changed a lot in the last just few years, and they're becoming more cerebral, and they're trusting the audience more. Amounts of dialogue, thinking about a film like Annihilation, for instance. Did you guys, were you
Absolutely. I mean, aesthetically, a lot of inspiration drawn from the classics, from like what we said, Star Wars, Alien, Blade Runner, that kind of like aesthetic. But we are very excited and hope to kind of be participating in kind of this more I guess, what was the word you used? This kind of more intellectual science fiction, I suppose. One of the things that we were really striving to do with this film was to kind of capture that feeling of immersion, where you don't hold the viewer's hand, you don't hold the audience's hand through the world. It's not putting a lot of words in the character's mouth that are explaining what's happening in bits of the world. We wanted that to be evident through the density of the details in the production design, where you pick up bits and pieces and piece together the feeling that this is an interconnected, alive world, and we're just watching, we're observing this part of it. And so I think, if anything, yeah, that's one of the things we're trying to do is the experiences you kind of get put in over your head, and then you kind of have to piece together, what this world is comprised of.
Question. Did you have any difficult stunts on set?
Oh, we had that one stunt that we prepared forever, and there was this other stunt that you guys asked if I could do it, but I wanted to stay safe, so I chose not to.
Yeah, all of our stunts were really tricky because of the helmets and because of the visors, and you did a lot of them. You did a lot of the tussling around, for sure, a lot of the following. But we also had a stunt double because it's just, you got to be really careful with the helmet getting jarred around.
So you guys were nominated in Seattle and able to win at South by Southwest. How excited are you for the major release based upon that early success already?
It's kind of it's no guarantee that a movie our size gets a theatrical release. So we're just like totally taken aback, totally floored. It's coming out to LA, New York, November 2nd, and then it's going to go wider all around the US, November 9th. And I just assumed that, this will just kind of go to streaming, and that's cool. But to get a theatrical release is really special, and we're so excited.
The VFX looks great on the trailer. How many times do you have to work as an independent film? VFX.
How much time?
Yes.
The VFX was a very we didn't hire a really big company. It was just kind of some friends of ours in Seattle that took this on as a passion project, and we were actually able to work on the spaceships during pre-production, so we had a really long time to get that right. The movie takes place on a toxic alien moon, so there's toxic dust in literally every exterior shot, and we were very insistent on doing that in a very practical way, so we actually shot dust for a really miserable day in my basement. We tried it in a few studios and it didn't work. My basement was small enough. You got the right airflow, so it's very particular dust, and then it was painstakingly layered into every shot, and it took months and months and months, and I don't think that any big movie would take the time to do that because it was a ridiculous workflow. But I think we have it has a really kind of organic feel to it that I'm really proud of.
So How was it directing J. Duplass?
J. Duplass, you don't direct him. He's such a pro. He was, he's a director, and it's kind of a dream as a first-time director to be someone with so experienced with him, because he's so empathetic to you as a filmmaker. On the second day of shooting, I was operating the camera in a very tight spaceship set. I was sweating. This is my first feature film. My mind's racing. I'm just trying to remember everything. And he just looks at me and says, "Hey, dude, stop. You're getting dehydrated. You need to drink water, and you're not going to have time to go get water. You need to ask someone to get you water." This is not what I'm thinking about. But he was completely right. So he more or less was a mentor on set for those first couple of weeks.
I think part of why he took the project too was he connected with kind of the DIY spirit of everything, because on his first films he was the camera op, the boom op, and the director and the cinematographer all at the same time, and there's a bit of that spirit in Prospect as well.
Very quickly it shifts.
It shifts. Yeah.
This guy as an actress, how do you shift like that? When you're going from one-on-one character to one-on-one Ezra.
Well, that was the hardest part, I think, trying to gracefully portray her character arc, because she obviously starts off as more timid, and as she grows and is forced to be with Ezra, she kind of starts standing up for herself and speaks for herself, and that was one of my favorite parts. And reading the script, that's kind of what drew me in. Just the complexity of her character arc.
And significantly, that was one of the things that we were able to shoot chronologically, and so I think it kind of worked really nicely.
Yeah.
Where
and I remember leaving the set, going back home, feeling more confident than I had.
But like you got to go through that transition, you know, because you were getting to know Jay, and then there was sort of like the passing of the guard, and then Pedro carried through the rest of the production. So
yeah.
Just like what kind of how did you pick the songs for it? Were they original songs that you commissioned, or were they pop songs that you licensed? For Sophie, whose headphones were those? Were those yours? And did
They were
you
mine.
actually listen to music?
I was listening to my own music usually.
We did. So those are custom-made headphones for the movie. We did have like a little Bluetooth like wireless thing that Sophie could wire in her own music like between takes and stuff, which was pretty cool. So the music is all it's not original. We didn't have like the time and money to compose like all these original pop songs. So kind of what I would do is I'd try to find pop music kind of from the 70s, 80s, and 60s from like other countries. Oh, I'm so sorry. From other countries. And so like, and generally on YouTube, I just go like, I like put in like Turkish pop music 70s, and then just go on a kind of a rabbit hole where you keep clicking, you get out of English at some point, it's just all language I don't know, and you're just kind of listening to things. And I think we found some really cool stuff that way. I mean, and then we had to, of course, hire Dan, a music supervisor, who then was like, I gave all these crazy song tunes and like, hey, can you find these licenses? And he's like, he said it's the worst job he's ever had. And then he came up with some ideas too, like just based off that stuff that worked, and he did an amazing job on the film.
But these details, like having evidence of pop music, evidence of like a civilization that like we're out in the wilderness, but we wanted it to feel like, you know, they were out in the wilderness to something, you know, that there was a culture out there. And so part of it was trying to like to weave this thread of like something that felt alien but also familiar in a lot of ways, and we wanted it to feel like pop music. And I think it sort of settled into a lot of like Eastern European and Asian sort of twists on American genres in a lot of ways, and so you kind of get that sort of intermixed sort of alien
I feel
feel.
like music was also really important to C's character, as it served as an escape for her and created like a disconnect from reality, and for a little place she could just go somewhere else.
Yeah, that escapism.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the color grading and whether that was how it already looked when you were shooting it, or if you made deliberate choices because I think the color palette really matches the film.
Yeah. No, the color grading was a huge part of the creative process for me. I sat in on all the color days, and we got like 2 solid weeks kind of spread out so we could create a look, spend some time, come back to it. And yeah, I mean, I think it was like we looked at a lot of like the original Hasselblad photography from the early Apollo missions, and trying to get kind of that texture. Like it's a very digital movie, but we wanted to kind of pull in some of that kind of, you know, retro kind of texture. And then kind of the other thing was that there was the blue rule, which was that for the most part only Sophie's suit was allowed to have a strong blue presence, and we tried to kind of take that out of the rest of the film. So it's a very like harsh world that they have to survive, but it's very warm and kind of beautiful, and we wanted to kind of play with that contrast.
What's your film?
The toxic alien forest is the Olympic rainforest, the Hoh rainforest specifically, which is in Washington State. It's a beautiful, amazing location, and then the interiors were shot in Seattle.
And we shot a lot of the feature in the exact same locations, like down to the tree that we shot the short film in, because we developed this relationship with a private land trust out there that had some old growth forest, and it's a place that we grew up hiking. It was kind of a part of the conception of the film. Was, you know, one of the first steps was, going to college together and going out and like backpacking out in these forests, and it was just like, we got to make a sci-fi film set here because it's so insane.
Is there, this is in prospect is huge success, and you get to make more set in this world. Do you have plans for the already existing universe that this film takes place in?
Yeah, I mean, through the development of Prospect, we kind of started making our own like Wikipedia, because it's like you introduce a new kind of subculture or a new character, and you got to figure out their backstory and where they're from, and the economics of everything are really important to us. We want to make sure it like kind of makes sense from an economic standpoint. So I feel like we actually have already fleshed out kind of the whole off world that you don't see in the film, and yeah, we're ready to tell more stories there.
Yeah, when you establish a world, you hope to be able to kind of, capitalize on it for as many like storytelling opportunities as you can. There were like bits of scripts or even drafts of like full drafts of scripts that we had worked on that kind of were set in the same universe, maybe at a different time period, and some of these ideas we're hoping to kind of coalesce and capitalize on as a television series or some other form of that. But yeah, it's definitely kind of a vibe and an aesthetic that we would like to tell more stories within.
So the visuals and the cinematography and everything is a lot of what people are raving about along with the storyline. Is there anything that was just super challenging to put together to make happen as far as shooting it when it came down to it?
I think the main thing is we were very committed to doing it on location, in a real rainforest, primarily shooting with natural light. So kind of like, everyone is checking like 3 different weather forecasts like on the hour, and there was we actually went to this location because we hoped it would be overcast. This is actually, it's just out of Forks, Washington, where the Twilight series is set, because the vampires like don't like the sun. But we went out there and we got this freakish like 2 weeks of sunshine. So like there's this one scene, it's actually Pedro Pascal's first scene, where we were scheduling the shots like by the hour as the sun would shift through the trees, and it was just a huge like logistic nightmare. But I think it really pays off to be in like a real natural location like that.
And part of it was by necessity and the limitations of our budget as well. We had to be nimble because we were out there. We couldn't be hauling all kinds of lighting equipment out there. So it was a lot of light modification and just using the natural light and dealing with it to get it done.
Sophie, I just want to let you know I love your accents. It's lovely.
Oh, thank you.
But I want to know one thing though. What's next for you?
I am not entirely sure, but once this comes out, I hope that there are more job opportunities. I'm 17 right now, so when I turn 18, there will be more job opportunities because I can work longer hours. Thank you.
So how old were you when you made the movie?
I was 16. The first week of filming, I had to finish my finals and everything, so it was incredibly overwhelming.
So bad.
But somehow I did it. I don't know how I did it. I look back.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
You guys tell me. What?
Were you always intending to act?
Yeah, I make music too, but I've been acting since I was like 4 years old. Yeah.
So you were originally in like theater, so what's the difference between transferring from stage to film with longer hours?
Yeah.
Well, it's been doing different things each day.
Yeah, it took me a while to be able to. Is with musical theater. That's what I studied in high school. It's so out there, and then with acting on screen, it's so natural, and that's what I like about it. It feels so much more real, and I don't know, it transforms me into this universe when it feels so real. So that's what I gravitated towards, and that's when I was like, I kind of want to do more film. Obviously, it's harder to get into that, but
I think we didn't even, not to cut you off.
No.
I think we didn't even fully realize like what we were getting into in terms of risk. Just she's in every single scene of the movie. She was shooting every single day of our 40-day long production. It's out in the middle of the woods with a helmet. And I think we benefited from her theater grit, from just like grinding it out in theater, being able to just be pro. And particularly with casting a minor in a lead role, we got lucky with Sophie.
Thank you.
This is my question for Pedro, but I wanted to ask you guys, as filmmakers, how did you collaborate with Pedro at all in forming his speech to sound like a tiny prospect?
That guy's so stupid talented. He tried out like a few takes on us, but he really owned that character. Like you never quite knew what he was going to do when you were going to call action. Like he surprised us on a continual basis, and such like he's hilarious. He keeps getting like cast in all this like big action stuff, but like at any point if he wants to do comedy, like because he'd have like the entire crew like cracking up right before a take, you'd yell action, and then he's like murdering someone, and you're like terrified. He can just like turn it on like that.
I mean, as far as the accent was concerned, it was just kind of a little bit of kind of more just feeling it out experimentation. I think the language, because it's so weird, sort of dictated a lot of that, and you couldn't just like deliver it in plain speech because there's so much like messing with vocabulary that's going on, and so it kind of needed something to fuse it all together.
Movies getting real wide releases, getting in front of a whole new audience that might not be familiar with this kind of thing. What's one thing you would want to say to mainstream sci-fi?
It's I don't know. I feel like a lot of it. I mean, I don't know. I think part of it is sort of acknowledging the achievement in terms of the budget. I think that's one of the things that, like, when we're kind of in the mix with all the big like superhero movies and blockbusters, I mean, we're very excited about that opportunity. At the same time, it's very much at its roots, in its DNA, it's an indie film that's trying to stretch the dollar.
It's an indie movie made by people who like are in love with science fiction. So like, it's like, we had like the budget of like half of a Marvel fight scene, but like we pushed it as far as we could. And I think people who like love science fiction, love like Alien and Blade Runner and like a lot of the stuff from the 70s and 80s will kind of see where we're coming from.
I mean, our production design team was comprised of people from all different backgrounds. These are people in Seattle where there's not like a strong established film production design industry, so a lot of people had more experience designing, as industrial engineers or mechanics or carpenters or cosplayers. We had a bunch of cosplayers like in our production design shop because we were kind of like drawing from like a diversity of skill sets, and it really was kind of the collective effort of this passionate team. I think it brought a lot of interesting perspectives because we really wanted the production design to have kind of a utilitarian heft to it, and so having a lot of people that were designing products in the real world sort of bringing their ideas to the table as opposed to people who have more experience just purely in a prop situation. But it was very much kind of a homegrown passion.
It's like people who would be like fans of the film were like making the film. And like the vibe during pre-production was like amazing. It's like, I don't know if I'll ever get to do anything so much fun where you just have this like family of people, no one's made a movie before, and you have like 7 months, this hard deadline to make a gazillion spaceships, suits, guns, everything. And I want to point out, we threw on the tables here, this is an in-world kind of artifact. This is a prospecting catalog.
You have more of them?
And I think there's more too if you run out. But more or less, this is like an advertisement for people who would potentially want to prospect in this universe. And it just kind of shows you the level of world building and props and detail that we got to go into.
Boy, I haven't even seen any of those. We were talking about this earlier. The first time I met Zeek and Chris, we drew connections from Miyazaki movies and how there's a young female protagonist, and that's what I mean, I grew up in those films, so that was kind of my inspiration for it.
So if I was interpreting what I was watching, the character of Damon the dad seemed to have a bit of a drug issue. Is that correct? And if so, can you speak to your inspiration for putting aside kind of subject?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the starting point was just kind of part of the world-building process where, like, it was very important to us that space travel in this universe is not glamorous, it's not easy, it takes a really long time in really uncomfortable conditions, and you have these just kind of blue-collar people going out to try to make a better life for themselves, and so it's just kind of a very natural thing. It's like, long-haul truckers. It's like there's all sorts of substances, caffeine, whatever, that, you kind of use to get through it, and so, like, for C's dad, this is not his first trip like this, and over the years of doing these kind of jobs, it's just seemed a very natural thing that he'd be kind of get addicted to these substances.
It's kind of a borderline addiction that accumulates over time, and just the habits of when you're spending, because in our minds, you're spending weeks if not months on these long haul like space journeys, and so you have to figure out a way to get through it. It's all cramped, it's very just uncomfortable, and so it's kind of to represent kind of that grind and how it just like was wearing him down.
Earlier this weekend, I got a chance to speak with the Mars Nat Geo people, which is a very facts-based, science-heavy, first steps into outer space show. Did you take any efforts to like have scientific accuracy in terms of as much as you could within the fiction?
Yeah. No, I mean, I'd say, like, I mean, it's not like, you know, interstellar level hard sci-fi, but trying to maintain a believable world is something that's really important to us. I actually loved, we got a Facebook message the other way. It wasn't even a comment. It was a direct Facebook message being like, how do they defecate in the suits? And I was like, yes, I love that people are thinking that through. And actually, it's like not in the film, it's not part of the plot, it's not explained, but we had like colostomy bags like on like the side of the belts that were even kind of squishy if you felt them. And it's like we really like wanted to like think through every aspect and try to be as true to that as possible, because I think that's what makes it the most engaging world and the most kind of tense, thrilling narrative.
I'm gonna watch the film differently now. I want to ask Sophie, what do you think about probably the year you've been with Pentagon, seeing people dressed as your character?
Oh God.
And now with the book thing, I'm going to be a little
I will be flattered. C is a great role model for any outliers or young females. She's really someone you can look forward to.
Sophie, is this your first Comic-Con?
Yes.
Is this your first press con?
Well, no. I think I've had things similar to this, but
What did you send her to go see at the Comic-Con? What you should see?
No, we
Yeah,
we just all got in here yesterday, so we're excited to go check stuff out after this. Yeah, we haven't seen anything yet.
Science fiction. I want to make sure we're not just writing science fiction. What's your, what do you say?
I mean, my favorite growing up was like Dune, like kind of that like classic stuff. Yeah, I don't know where you.
I mean, I've been digging into Foundations recently, just because it's sort of relevant to some of the ideas we're trying to play with some future stuff. One that always stuck out to me from kind of like adolescence was Dan Simmons' Hyperion. Just because it was like, it's also just kind of this roulette of all these different crazy ideas, and when you're interacting with them for the first time, you have like, you know, what was it, that American poet that was like out, and he had his like portal house where like every room like went to a different space, but like
How did you guys put together your Marvel fighting budget?
So we, I mean, a kind of big part of it is that we. This gets, I mean, a little industry inside, but we like had our own line producer from doing commercials, and we actually built the budget totally from scratch. Like any traditional industry person stepping in like would have told us our movie was impossible. And so Bryce Budke, who's another college friend of ours, came from Microsoft, like just kind of reinvented a way of like doing this budget, and it was, I mean, really laborious, but it had to, you know, like it included like a lot of unusual things. Like we bought our own CNC machine, like for, you know, like there was budgets for tools like glue. Like it was like got very nitty gritty, and we had to like prove to financiers that this wasn't just a stupid idea. And like the script, which we rewrote 4 times, we rewrote the budget 10 times, like to get to that part. So it was a big process.
we were asking for a lot, and a lot of it was kind of unprecedented in the sense that's like, oh yeah, and we want 40 days of production, and we want 7 months to a year of lead time to build all the props and sets and costumes. And in our minds, it's like, this is a great deal because, you know, like we're doing it all for this much money. The flip side is we need the time to execute it. And so that was a challenge in terms of pitching people. I think there was a lot of established, like, you know, financing entities that would hear some of these numbers and just be like, nope.
We got laughed out of a lot of rooms. I mean, not literally, but people like, oh, you want to do that?
Yeah,
okay.
But we eventually found Braun up in Vancouver, who kind of bought the whole story that we were trying to sell and let us do it. So
So you talked about filming the Dust in Your Basement. Were there any other money-saving things that you did that were kind of unconventional kind of now?
I mean, there's a lot of efficiencies born out of this kind of warehouse thing. Part of it was that we took out a year-long lease on a warehouse, and this became our production offices in pre-production. It was the shop where all the props and costumes were built. Then in production, it transitioned into the stage because we had built the sets there, and so we just shot them there. We did some like DIY soundproofing measures to like make that work out, and then it became our post-production studio. One of the cool bits was that in because we're editing in the shop and we have the set sitting outside, and so we'd be like cutting together the scene where they land and be like, oh, we could really use this insert that we don't have. We'd put someone in a sleeve, walk out, 50 feet into the warehouse, we'd shoot it, and then just throw it into the cut. And so we were doing a lot of we were able to do a lot of continuous pickup shooting just because
fix a lot of our mistakes.
Yeah, we were editing in the building that contained all the sets and costumes and props and stuff too. So
one of the biggest challenges for indies is to get the word out. How have you guys tried any kind of creative marketing measures and stuff just to get people to I mean, we're here, obviously, but you're here at New York Comic Con, but is there anything that you guys have just to put the word out?
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't quite started yet, but we're really excited to be working with Dust, which is a big like sci-fi Facebook page, and we've been working with them on creating a lot of like unusual kind of in-world like additional materials and artifacts and videos. So they're going to be rolling out a constant stream of like content that I'm really excited about that'll kind of expand the world of the film.
I think these little catalogs are kind of a good example. We like sort of building out in-world artifacts, and we just had a bunch. We have a bunch of material. We had a bunch of like logos that we developed that we didn't, that don't get a ton of screen time in the film, and there's just kind of, this whole world that we wanted to flesh out, and we wanted to feel like go forth, go west, young man, sort of go.
You'll notice even in the trailer, like Sophie half the time wears this just like gray sweatshirt with a cartoon character, and we had to like kind of build out a cartoon show, and we actually wanted to know like what are the other characters, and we drew a few of them, and you'll see there's ads done by this cartoon character throughout that catalog as well.
I make this comparison with Love. It feels like Firefly in a sense. I don't know if you guys were fans of the show, where there was this world that was the next step was already kind of planned out. It feels like you guys are very thorough in kind of building this world. It's not a question. I'm just excited to see
for sure. Yes.
This is your first long-term film. It's an independent film, and it's a very challenging film. How do you negotiate between you two to make the best picture?
Between the two of us, I'd actually say like Prospect for me at least was probably the most harmonious our co-directing relationship has ever been, because it was so hard and so exhausting that to have another person with you through that process is awesome. Like I totally recommend it. It's like we really just kind of relied on each other. We needed each other, through that process.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is a factor of habit and just the fact that we run a business together. We've been shooting commercials together. It's sort of this is our first feature, and so like we don't really know any other way. And this is kind of just what everything has been culminating.
There was one big argument on set. There was a scene where Sophie's filter was running low, and I'm like, she should like push this button like a bunch of times. Like we built these cool buttons, she should push the button. And Chris is like, no, she shouldn't push the button. And we argued about that for like 5 minutes, and then we didn't use the footage at all.
It was arbitrary button pushing. It didnn't make sense in that situation.
Which is it's like maybe like a reset thing.
What would a button do? I don't.
It made sense.
Do you think that working with a lower budget is better for creativity in a general sense? Like when we talk about how the industry works, we're not calling anyone specific out, just in general. Not trying to get you in trouble.
Yeah, I mean it's sort of a two-sided coin there. I think work like. I've always found that restrictions, in a lot of ways make creativity, finding inspiration even easier in some ways, because it sort of focuses your vision. Obviously, once you kind of get off to the races, then all you want is more money to do all the things that you want to do. But
I think the distinction is that this movie was like built to be inexpensive. Like it's not like we were taking some story and then like figuring out how to do it cheap. It's like we were thinking Chris and I wrote it. We were thinking while we were writing, like what are the implications like on set. So it was very much designed to be that way.
And I would encourage people who are trying to get their first feature off the ground or get into filmmaking to be thinking, financially as well, to be strategic with kind of the creative development, because everything is interconnected, and that we were palpably aware that the only way we got a shot at doing something like this was if it was very economical. So
Just one question. In terms of kind of branching out, spreading out beyond film possibility, right? And ideally, let's say looking at the comic publishing, would you be interested in working, like ideally, to kind of bring this to a comic book?
not super familiar with the publishers.
I know there's been some talk about kind of comic books. We we actually the concept artist for the film is a very talented illustrator by the name of Laurie Greasley, and he actually comes more from the comic book world. So we've actually been talking like comic book ideas with him. He's a very like detailed aesthetic that like really helped us like flesh out the production design. It'd be very exciting if we were able to do that.
If you haven't seen his work, you should check it out. It's Laurie Greasley again, and he was very much a part of the core early concepting team, and he influenced a lot of what became the designs of the suits and all the stuff.
You did the poster?
No, the poster is photographed.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, it's because it looks like an illustration.
Yeah, it kind of has that style, but yeah, it started with photos. Yeah.
Sophie, if you had a favorite actor or actress, who would you like to work with?
Who would I like to work with? I love Michelle Williams. It's Carey Mulligan. Yeah, Carey Mulligan, definitely.
You're based in Chicago?
I'm based in Chicago, but I'm likely moving to LA when I turn 18.
You mentioned Miyazaki.
Oh man.
I mean, Miyazaki is kind of one of those where when, part of the conception of this is it's all driven by a young female protagonist, and when you kind of look at the swath of material, Miyazaki films are the ones that have that, and so that was kind of a natural thing, and then it was retrospective to discover that, like, Nausicaa had, like, a very similar vibe with, like, the toxic spores and stuff floating in the air.
I mean, Akira gets bounced around a lot with the 80s aesthetic. We love Cowboy Bebop and some of that similar kind of space western vibe.
Mm-hmm. I'd like at some point to, maybe even go a little harder in the stylization, similar to Cowboy Bebop, because they have that real, like, slick kind of vibe to it, which would be fun.
Yeah.
Where you guys at? What kind of nights?
So Chris and I are in development with Amazon on a TV show that's also science fiction that we can't say too much about at this point, but where Prospect is a little more Western, it actually leans a little more medieval sci-fi. So hopefully, that happens.
So do you have a Game of Thrones-ish look? Do you think of trying to do more fantasy?
I mean, I'd like to stay along the indie path, just with projects that I feel passionately about. So we'll see what happens with that.
Are most of your ideas based in sci-fi? Do you come up with stories to tell? The fact that this is sci-fi and then your next thing is also sci-fi?
Yeah, we've kind of found ourselves, like, we didn't set out explicitly to be science fiction filmmakers. We kind of fell into it, and we're very happy in it. I think kind of the through line is really the world building element of it, is really wanting to, there's something very exciting about crafting something from the ground up. And, as kids, we were inspired by a lot of science fiction and fantasy properties, and what you get from that is, like, the density of the lore and really getting lost in it, and we wanted to kind of capture some of that feeling and just, like, being completely immersed in something.
It's really the world building opportunity. I mean, we really see world building itself as an art form, and the ability to, like, make kind of images and tones and atmospheres on kind of a clean slate is just kind of like one of the most fun, exciting things.
So you guys had a chance to go back into feature film
Oh man.
I don't know. We tried to write that. And it was tricky. That one was never. In the Pines was our first short film. It's about. It's kind of a little bit more experimental and about a girl who's trying to get abducted by aliens. We definitely came up with a really cool alien concept when we were fleshing out the feature, but we couldn't really get everything to jam together. I bet that alien comes up somewhere else.
Yeah,
we should use that, but that one was never. That one was always kind of a standalone thing, and it sort of felt like forcing it to make it into a feature.
Without giving too much away for those that haven't seen it, is there just one specific scene that you were just completely happy with how it came together and you're excited? Like, is there one specific thing that you?
That has to give something.
That has to give something away.
There's the operation that
there's a scene that it's just Sophie and Pedro Pascal, and it was the scene. I guess what I can say about it is we shot a lot of different angles of this scene. And when we got into editing, we just kind of played out one angle. It's a very uncut shot. And Sophie and Pedro's performance is just like amazing. And we didn't even realize it on the day. It wasn't until we got to the editing room, we're like, oh my gosh, we actually captured something here. And like, I feel like I can't take credit for it. Like, they just brought it that day.
Another scene I really like is just when they land on the planet. It was something that, I think Apollo 13 was one of the most influential films of mine growing up, and just sort of like driving in that really grounded sort of like how scary space is, and just kind of the 60s level of technology, using that to interact with something so insane. And we wanted to kind of capture some of that, where it's not like cut to exterior and then now you're on the moon. We wanted to sort of to have that experience in more or less real time, and like sit with someone as they're careening down to the surface. And so that was something that was really important to me, and I'm very happy with how it turned out.
I'm sorry.
No, it isn't.
Any particular scene you liked?
Any scenes that I liked?
Enjoyed on set?
There's this one scene where C opens up to Ezra about her interest in this book, and that's actually what I used to audition with, and I really just love that monologue. That's where you get to see another side, and she opens up to Ezra, and that's what
And she had to do it like in continuous, like 5-minute takes,
And it was a
in the helmet,
monologue.
hiking, and like suffocating.
might have been one of the hardest.
And she still totally owned it.
Thank you.
What are you excited to check out at the con?
What?
What do you want to check out?
Oh, who are you talking about? Us?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I really dig like action figurines, especially artists who are doing like original stuff. So there's a few people that I kind of have marked that I'm gonna go check out. I like Artist Alley is like super cool.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I've been hearing.
Like I love the. I mean, as much as like I'm fans of the big movies, to me what's exciting is seeing like what the original stuff like kind of on the ground level is.